Picture this. It's 2013, you're home alone at night, and you decide to turn on your family computer and boot up Minecraft. Even though it's still a relatively new game at this point, it's already a global phenomenon, and chances are everyone else in your school has also started playing it. You're probably playing on your recently started single player survival world, or you might have recently started a farm and upgraded from your dirt house to a long term base. From here, maybe you choose to head off mining or exploring. It's this moment that you might start to notice that something feels off. It might be subtle at first, but over time it'll become more and more noticeable. Maybe you start to notice that other than the overly upbeat soundtrack and the sound of your own footsteps, you're traveling in almost complete silence. Or since your computer is only capable of rendering about two chunks, you might start to look deeper into the fog at the edge of your screen. Your mind might start to wander to that creepypasta your friends were telling you about earlier that day. If you're anything like I was at this point, your imagination probably started to run wild, and you might even have to stop playing the game. For me, there's always been something about the emptiness and the silence of older games like this that's actually one of the only things that can genuinely scare me. There's something that I find uniquely creepy about games from this era. Even games that weren't actually even supposed to be scary had this weird kind of off kilter vibe to them. And I know I'm not alone in feeling this. I teased the idea of this video on my last one, and the reaction was a lot stronger than I'd expected, so here we are. This video is intended as sort of a Halloween special, but the thing is, I've never really done a video at this kind of pace and tone, and it's not that heavily scripted, so I apologise if the video is a bit rambly or badly paced. With all that being said, enjoy the video, and let's find out what game designers were doing back then to make these worlds feel so strange. I'd say one of the big reasons for this was the uncanny valley. Back in the 2000s, 3D games were still in their infancy and had only barely started to become realistic. Characters still had stiff movements, dead eyes, and talking animations usually boiled down to the characters' mouths just flapping open and closed out of time with the dialogue. What I'd see as the other primary driver of this kind of feeling is the liminal spaces. For anyone unfamiliar with liminal spaces, it's a style of horror and photography that's become a phenomenon on the internet in the last couple of years that revolves around empty and lifeless spaces that you usually expect to be full of life. Even if this feeling of loneliness and emptiness was unintentional, this is a style of horror that these older developers did incredibly well, and I think has kind of been lost by modern AAA studios. I've been replaying a couple of much older games recently. Firstly, the original Halo CE on legacy graphics for pretty obvious reasons. From there, I went to the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, and the general creepy vibe of those two games is what inspired me to make this video. Even though Halo CE is a game of futuristic warfare and space zombies and body horror, what I find most terrifying are the moments where there's nothing. In the moments where you're not fighting for the fate of humanity, you're wandering across eerily empty, windswept landscapes where you can always be reminded of how alien your surroundings are and just how out of place you are by looking up and seeing the almost psychedelic image of the surface you're currently standing on wrapping up and around you, or prowling through dark, deserted, but eerily alive hallways deep below the ring's surface. In these older games, the sound design plays just as big a part in creating this weird, empty feeling as the visuals. On the surface, there are constant cold winds, and in the underground alien structures, there are occasional sounds of distant breathing, and what I can best describe as a heartbeat, giving these ancient hallways a strangely alive feeling, like there could be something lurking in the shadows, or even the corridors and structures themselves are alive. Even though I've played Halo CE through a million times, it can still make me feel uneasy. But the first time I played it when I was younger, I was just overwhelmed by how ominous the environments were. Same with Morrowind. I'll admit I haven't finished it yet, but I'm far enough in to get the general vibe of the game, and it's a perfect example of this era of horror. While it obviously isn't an outright horror game, it does have a fairly unsettling tone. The land of Vardenfell that it's set in is defined by an oppressive, decaying feeling. It's mainly covered by scorched, ash colored plains that are roamed by strange and often dangerous creatures. Exploring here feels precarious because you really get the feeling that anything could be lurking out there just beyond the fog. This is also amplified by the liminal spaces that give exploring in this game an almost overwhelmingly uneasy feeling. And this kind of liminal space horror affected every game from this era. Everything from Halo to Half-Life to Morrowind to Call of Duty to Minecraft. I think that something just generally interesting about this era of media that's inherently kind of unique and creepy are just the ways we accessed and viewed the media back then. A lot of the games from this era lean into the low-res textures and muted color palettes, since it was the age of CRT TVs. Everything had this slightly retro, fuzzy, and analog feeling to it. This gave the games an almost dreamlike or sometimes kind of nightmarish quality. Because of the technical limitations at the time, most games also used environmental fog to mask the fact that computers at the time couldn't render anything beyond that point. But it only added to the foreboding and mysterious feeling of these worlds. Something else that fed into this feeling is the fact that the internet was only in its infancy at this time, meaning that rumors and urban myths related to these games spread quickly and it was difficult to fact check. This era of the young internet and its nostalgic and kind of unsettling feeling seems to have created an entire aesthetic. I'm not exactly sure what it's called, but I absolutely love it. I also might have recently been working on a little project that uses this aesthetic, so keep an eye out for that. Speaking of Minecraft, I think that no game is ever going to capture the same kind of feeling that Minecraft had in the early 2010s. The relatively young, fragmented internet of the era allowed urban myths like Herobrine to spread, and the sparsely populated, empty, and almost liminal world meant that they could kind of feel real. Even to this day, whenever I play Minecraft, I have to use a mod that adds ambient sounds like water and birdsong to the game, because otherwise the silence and feeling of loneliness just really gets to me. And there will never be a gaming myth ever again on the level of Herobrine. If you weren't around yet or weren't playing Minecraft at this time, first of all, I'm really sorry you missed out. And second of all, there is genuinely no way I can explain to you how much people genuinely believed in Herobrine. And also, just since I might not get another chance to say this, I'm really wondering if anyone else on the planet remembers White Eyes. It was sort of like this weird Herobrine precursor that revolved around these blurry images of white eyes staring out of the darkness in caves in early versions of Minecraft. Before Herobrine was popular, and even afterwards, this was one of my obsessions. So shout out to anyone who remembers White Eyes. Something else that added to this feeling of loneliness is just how rudimentary the guidance and storytelling techniques were at the time. Like in Halo CE, for example, where it literally just shows you how to move around and shoot your weapon, and then throws you right into battle. And the story is mainly told through the environment and contextual clues, with occasional brief dialogue and simple cutscenes at rare intervals throughout the levels. If this sounds negative, it definitely isn't. I think that this style of storytelling is really something that studios have lost. Even in the newer games and older franchises like Halo, it feels like even aspects of the story that are supposed to feel dark and cryptic and mysterious are spelled out, and the dialogue can sometimes literally feel like an audio description. This is a problem that I have with a lot of modern games, how they always seem to assume that the player has never played a game before in their life, and tutorials are still holding your hand even hours into the game. This has just occurred to me now, but I really miss when tutorials taught the player by showing them how to do something through cleverly staged gameplay, instead of these stupid text pop-ups. I'm looking at you, Bethesda. I think it's funny that developers in AAA studios today struggle to create environments that are anywhere near as deeply unsettling and steeped in environmental storytelling that devs in indie or AA studios 10 or 15 or even 20 years ago were able to create, even with a fraction of the budget and major limitations from the technology of the era. In saying this, however, indie devs in particular seem to have caught on to this style of horror, and there's been a fairly recent resurgence in horror games that use very early 2000s mechanics and art direction, with some of the most successful games being like Iron Lung and Squirrel Stapler by David. I'm really sorry if I butcher this name. Simansky. There's a definite renewed interest in this aesthetic and style, and I just hope that larger developers take some cues from smaller creators and once again learn to create environments that can tell compelling stories and unsettle the player without having to say a word. Anyway, that's all I've got to say for today. If you enjoy listening to me ramble on about all this nonsense, please consider subscribing to the channel and following me on X. Unless things go horribly wrong, this video should be going out around Halloween, so happy Halloween from me. Also, thanks for 200 subscribers. We hit that milestone as I was editing this video. Other than that, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.